Now that we have our ship shooting lasers, we need to add some enemies. I'm gonna add then other variables or constants in this case at the top of the class. I'm gonna add a read-only max enemies. Will be set to 10 for now, and I'm gonna add also the array of enemies. They will be sprites like the ship here, but they will be now enemies. So I'll set the enemies. It's an sprite array, right? And I'm gonna set that to an empty array, like in the mesh for the stars and the lasers. But this is now an sprite, so I need to create a method to set all the enemies. I'm gonna add a set enemies method here, like I am doing. So I always have a method for set something and update something. In the case of the ship, I have a method to set the ship and update the ship. Right, the set will be calling the init method, and the update will be used in the main update method. I'm going to do the same for all the stuff that I'm going to create here. So going back again to our coding. So I'm going to create an SpriteManager. Const here. And one manager, it's equals a new SpriteManager. Actually, I'm gonna create two because I'm gonna create two different kinds of enemies, right? So this will be the enemy one manager, and I need to add the path of the resource, so that will be in the assets. If I go to the assets here, I have the N1 in one PNG. And the capacity will be 10 because I'm going to create 10 enemies, and I'm going to pass the scene. Five, 10 arguments, we'll go 4. So the first argument is the name, the second the image, third the capacity. I need to set the size. That's right. So I need to set the size here. So the size for the enemies, it's 16 and 16 pixels. So width 16 and height 16. And that's it. So that's for our first enemy, and I'm gonna create other that will be for the second enemy. I have another image called N2, which is this one. So they have 5 frames. Remember that in Babylon we call them cells. So that's fine for now. And I'm gonna add a for loop, right? So maybe I'm gonna get this for loop here. I'm gonna use this here, and I'm gonna change this for max enemies, right? And I'm gonna create the 10 enemies as a sprite. So const n1 equals new sprite, and I'm gonna set the name. Okay, so I'm gonna set the name with the n1, and then I'm gonna add the index here just to have 10 different names for every enemy, and I'm gonna pass the N1 manager like this. I'm gonna do the same for the N2. And I'm gonna start adding the I'm going to start setting the properties for every enemy. So I'm gonna just set the sub index to 0 because I want to start the animation from the first frame. So in the N1, I'm gonna set the new width to 0.5. Remember that the width from the enemy is not the same as the width of the size of the SpriteManager. So this is asking for the image or the frames for the sprite frames measures, and here the enemy one, the sprite, it has a size by default of 1, right? Like in the units of the workspace. That's why I need to set that again. So I'm going to change that to 2.5 again. And I'm going to do the same thing with the other enemy, for the enemy 2. And lastly, I'm going to set the position of the enemies. And 1 position equals new vector 3, and I'm gonna put those in like they are just created. I'm gonna put them very far away from our camera. So the first thing is I'm gonna use the random function for the random number. I'm gonna go and say 8 and 100 in the x-axis, and I'm gonna do the same for the y-axis. That will be -4 and 4 and 0 for the z-axis. I'm not going to use this axis anymore because this is a 2D game, so I'm not messing with that. So I'm going to do the same for the enemy 2, and at the end I'm going to add this enemy push and 1, and I'm going to do the same for the enemy 2, and that's it. Now the enemies are created, but they are not like enabled, right? Because they are pretty away from our camera. So the first thing I'm gonna do here is that I change the cell index. I need to also to execute a little piece of code to saying that the N1 play animation, right? So the play animation is a method of the sprite where we're gonna define what are the frames of the animation. If I go to the enemy 1, I have four frames, and if I go to the enemy 2, I have 5 frames, right? So I want to play the animation from index 0 to index 3, which is the number 4 for the enemy 1. I'm gonna loop that for true. Yes, I want to loop that, and I want to add a delay number, which is like the time that it will take for every frame to change. So that's fine for that, and I'm gonna do the same for the enemy 2, but in this case I'm gonna change because this has more frames, 1 more frame. So this will be make the animation to the sprite to animate the frame between all the frames that are set. So this method I think is complete for now, and I need to call this in the init. If I go to the init, update, render, okay, here in the init, this set enemies. Now I need to move the enemies, right? So for now, I'm gonna just create the update enemies method as well at the end here. Update enemies. And of course I need to have a loop again, right? Because I need to check for all the enemies. Let me do a little change here. So I'm gonna come back to this enemies array here, and I'm just gonna create two different arrays, one for to group the enemies in a different array, so that because I can do that with just one array, but it can be so complicated for you, so I don't want to mess with that at the moment, because we're going to change that in the future. So the enemies 1 and these enemies 2. So those are the changes that we need. So we have one array for enemies 1 and another array for enemies 2. That's fine, that's working. So in this case, now I can call the enemies the X, right? So the N1, the enemy 1 will be from the first array, from the enemies 1 array at this index. And I'm going to do the same for the other enemy. So for the enemy 2, so I need to change also the name of the array. And that's it. I need to fix this now. So if the enemy 1 is visible, I'm going to start moving that from the right to the left. So in the opposite way the our lists are going. So in this case, I'm gonna get the enemy 1 position.x minus equals 0.06, and if the enemy 1 is visible, or the enemy at this index is visible, then it will start moving to the left. I'm gonna do the same for the other. I know this is not like the don't repeat yourself pattern and all that stuff. I just want to make something like this because I want to make the code simpler for you to understand. Okay, I don't want to mess with the best practices for now in programming. I know how to do it. And that will be for now. So with this, I can start moving the enemies from the right to the left. And I'm going to set this method in the update when the game state is playing. This update later. So if I go now to the code, let me see if I can see the enemies. Oh, sorry, I need to call the set enemies in the init function as well. I forgot. Set enemies. Now if you go to the browser right here and you refresh the site, you can see now we have enemies. So there will be appearing here, and that's what we wanted. We created several enemies. We set their position, and we created an update method so they can start moving from the right to the left, right in the same direction as the stars in the background. So if you're having an issue, nothing is appearing there. So I had a typo here in the size for the enemies. It was like this, width, but it should be width. If you can fix that, then you should be ready to go. So this is for now. For the enemies, we need to start looking away so we can collide between the ship, the lasers, and the enemies and the bullets, right? That's what is coming in the next video. Hey, thanks for watching. And if you have any suggestion or comment, just put it below. Thank you.